And these Brain Power Hours are just one of many, many programs, folks, through the Amen Clinic's Brain Warrior Alumni Network, an exclusive community that's designed especially for each and every one of you, free of charge, and our commitment to you for the rest of your life. If you're an Amen Clinic's alum and haven't joined yet, I invite you to do so tonight by clicking the link that's in the Q&A. Membership is free to everyone, and it's free to all patients over the age of 18. And for those under 18 and their parents who want to join, that we actually have a group and welcome you to join us. And now it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the man of the hour, Dr. Daniel Emina, a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist and the associate medical director at Amen Clinics, a nationwide leader in brain health founded by Dr. Daniel Amen. Dr. Emina earned his medical degree from UCLA and completed his psychiatry residency and child adolescent fellowship at the University of Hawaii. He integrates psychotherapy, medication management, functional brain imaging, TMS, and integrative therapies to help patients optimize their brain health. He treats a wide range of conditions, including anxiety, depression, ADHD, addiction, and trauma-related disorders, all with the belief that every single person has a unique purpose and that brain health is vital to achieving it. He's also the co-author of The Suicide Solution, written with Rick Lawrence, a faith-informed, science-based guide offering hope and healing for those struggling with suicidality. Please, it is my pleasure, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Daniel Emina. And I think you're...
Let me get that. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Daniel Emina, as Charlie so kindly introduced me. I'm one of the neuropsychiatrists here at the clinic. I've been at the clinic now for 11 years. Amazing how time flies. I have a presentation and I want to make sure we are able to get through it, and I want it to be as actionable as possible. So I did spend some time working through some direct things that you can take home and actually utilize today. So that I even have a separate handout if anybody decides that they want a handout later, just so that if you need something actionable to use. It's a very important topic. It's a topic that I think, even though there's an element of discussing suicide prevention, I think it's a topic that's applicable for everyone because it's about living life more abundantly. It's utilizing strategies to be better at being more connected, happier, and hopeful, and looking forward to our future. So I have a slide deck. I'm going to jump into it. I don't know if you guys are able to see my slides though. Are you guys able to see that yet?
Yes, I see your
Okay.
Your lead slide.
Excellent. All right, so we'll jump straight into it. I like interactive discussions, but I know just for sake of continuity, and we may end up saving some of them. If something is really popping in your mind and you really want to ask it, I think Charlie, you can prompt me potentially if someone has written out a question.
I'll watch the Q&A and prompt you when there's a good opportunity to do so.
Okay, I'm more than willing to have some back and forth in this. So I tend to do best in the context of community and communication. So it's obviously a little different when we're doing a webinar, but I still, I'll still enjoy this too. And plus it's towards the end of the day. I got to keep everybody engaged and keep myself engaged so if people aren't falling asleep too, right? So we'll try to keep it interesting. So the discussion today is hope in the future, the connection between brain health and a hopeful and vibrant life. There will be some Q&A either at the front or at the end. I know that we already sent out the 3 quick questions. Charlie, do you want to discuss that now? Or is that 2 at the end, right?
We didn't do the 3 quick questions because we were running late getting in, so we're going to do those at the end.
Okay, all right. So jump in. So again, about me, Charlie already mentioned that I had the privilege of being able to work on this book, The Suicide Solution, with Rick Lawrence. Interestingly enough, we wrote it during 2020. It was quite interesting in the context of all the stressors and such that we all went through at that time to write this book. And it was been a privilege to work with clients who've read the book and to see the impact that it's had. It does come from a uniquely more faith-based perspective. So if someone has, looking for a slightly different perspective on it, fully understand. But we were approached, and I was approached to write this from this perspective because, interestingly enough, uh, the church isn't actually great at talking about this. So it was a nice opportunity to write this book, and Rick was excellent. I always joke that if I had written it just probably by myself, I might still be writing it. So Rick made it a much easier process. I've had the privilege of working at the Amen clinics, as I said, now for 11 years. Everyone probably on this call, you have some connection to the Amen clinics, anyways, and so you know Dr. Daniel Amen, you know the work he has done, and the pioneer he is in this field, um, making something that seemed we've kind of taken it for granted now that imaging can be something that we do in psychiatric care. The type of functional imaging that we do, the type of functional medicine, this integrative type of care uh, wasn't something that was easily to access in the past. So I'm very thankful for Daniel Amen and this clinic and the opportunity to work here and to do the work we do. So why this talk and what's the challenge? The brain health crisis is leading to a rise in mental health diagnosis and an increase in suicidality. That's really what it comes down to. There's an increasing mix of stressors, which we'll get into, that lead many to feel unsafe, stuck, and hopeless. Um, our goal here at the clinic is to empower towards safety, skills, and hope. So this conversation today my hope is to not only empower you, even if you say, hey, I've never had a suicidal thought in my life. Well, thank God. There can still be skills here that are beneficial to you, and because they will help lead into that living life more abundantly piece. And then there are also skills here that might be beneficial to you if you are ever put in a position where you need to support somebody else who may be having suicidal thoughts. So think of this as more of a overall brain health focus with extra skills to support people who may have had those thoughts at some point in their life. So could be you individually, it could be a family member, a friend. You never know when these skills could be beneficial. So anxiety and depression symptoms are actually quite common. At least up to a third of reported symptoms, with the age group of 18 to 29 having almost 50% will record some level of symptoms of anxiety and depression. And obviously, there's a mix of reasons of why that may occur. You may also notice that, unfortunately, women do tend to have to deal with a bit more of the symptoms, and there's a mix of reasons there. Again, they having to deal with us men, but also the hormones potentially could be a contributor. The increased burden of caring for families. I tend to find that most of the clients I work with, uh, the 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 mother in the situation is often the one that keeps everybody alive in some ways. So I often comment on that and try to encourage moms to take care of themselves as much as they're able to. What's driving the rise overall? So it's a mix of risk, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I know this tends to come up. This is usually one of the questions, like, why is this even happening in the first place? I do think there's an element of where we do live in this kind of more toxic environment in some ways, and not just toxic because of like actual toxins, but toxic in the sense of maybe even potential political climate, the social media climate, the algorithms, what we're exposed to, and the impact that it has on us. But there's this converging mix of we're hyper connected, but also hyper lonely. So there's social disconnection, there's loneliness, there's shrinking in-person ties, and then there's shrinking quality connections. And a lot of this is you can imagine ramped up in the context of COVID. The digital environment, social media, so whether it's comparisons, bullying, harmful feeds, algorithms. The algorithms piece is getting you pulled into an echo chamber that may not only amplify your own belief system, but sometimes um, in extreme situations create even more fear and anxiety and distrust because we as humans are in some ways wired to be drawn towards the negative news as a protective mechanism. You want to know what the bad thing is, and it feeds a lot of dopamine release. The challenge is it's dopamine depleting overall, and it's stress inducing, cortisol increasing, and it creates more distrust. The algorithms like doing this to us because the algorithms want to sell ads. And unfortunately, we get stuck in these loops. So being mindful of what is happening becomes extra important, and as we become intelligent viewers overall. But sleep issues, circadian disruption issues, the privilege of having light as an invention has caused more of that, right? Because before, maybe you had you had fire, but when the sun went down, your brain had all the cues to know that it was time to sleep. Now we can have our homes as bright as day quite often, especially with LED-based lights and such. So that disrupts that natural rhythm. We have screens that we can put just inches from our face, which again further disrupts that natural rhythm. And even if you say, well, I still get the same amount of sleep, it's just skewed off a little bit on timing, that still disrupts the natural rhythm and can create less restful sleep and cognitive effects. So sleep, and we see this definitely in kids too, and teens in particular. Substances, as you know, the alcohol is a toxin, and we've seen that even though cannabis has been legalized and there may be legitimate uses for it for pain syndromes and nausea syndromes, especially in cancer, it can be devastating for young brains, and it overall does reduce activity in the brain. So, as I say, sometimes nothing is free. It can come with its own problems. The mix of economic stressors, access to lethal means. Most suicides are actually almost 50% or sometimes greater than 50%, depending on which stat, are completed with if a firearm is used. So you can already tell one of the mechanisms of reducing completed suicides is reducing access to the firearm for that individual. So there's youth-specific stressors. There was obviously the pandemic and post-pandemic space. There's the basics of just not being able to access care. And there has been a shift in measurement. There's been more awareness. More people are willing to talk about, hey, depression, anxiety, and such, and even suicidal ideation than ever before. There's probably an element of sometimes what's been called a contagion, like where, and unfortunately we've seen this where one person in school maybe passes away from suicide, but then now there's, one or two others in the following year. So by the numbers overall, about 1 in 10-ish with depression. I'll say another 1 in 10, even though it's about, with diagnosed anxiety. So these are diagnosed depression, diagnosed anxiety versus having some of the symptoms of it. And suicidality overall, which includes the thoughts and planning and attempts versus actually completed. There are about 12 million or so uh, people in America who have serious thoughts every year, with about another 3.7 or so million making plans, and then 1.5 million with attempts. So, I mean, think about that. That's a lot of people. 1.5 million with attempts. Fortunately, um, it's not completed suicides, but unfortunately, each of those lives that end through suicide matter, and that number has continued to increase over the last 20 years or so. So reaching heights of up to 49,000 roughly ish a year, with the high being about, if we look at a rate, about 14 or so per 100,000. And the scary thing about that is that about every 11 minutes or so, someone unfortunately passes away by suicide in the United States. I'm going to come with hope. So I'm just giving you kind of the state of where we're at, but don't worry, we're going to come with hope of what we will do about this and what we are doing about it. So the trend overall, you're seeing that rate go from about 10 or so, and even it was actually even a little less starting in 99, all the way to that peak of about 14.2. Again, most suicides completed with a firearm. And we are seeing some divergence in like the groups and changes in the groups. It had one of the biggest concerns is that it had become the second leading cause of death in youth, which was obviously concerning, um, and and led to some significant interventions. Was actually one of the triggers for us to write the book. So I like this quote over on the left over there by Tolstoy, where he says, "Happy families are all alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." To reframe it kind of in this context of our conversation, every healthy brain is alike in its wholeness, but every unhealthy brain is unhealthy in its own way. And in many ways, this actually relates to why we even do brain scans, right? If you think about it, it's the idea of recognizing what is led to unhealth in a brain, and then how we need to directly address it. So what are some of the risk factors? Obviously, a sense of hopelessness, psychiatric disorder in itself, 90 plus percentage. So 90% of cases of completed suicides, there's already a psychiatric diagnosis on the person's either charge or such. So they've already met with a provider at some point, and the diagnosis has been clearly stated. Um, Alcohol and other substance use disorders contribute to it, and inadequate problem solving and this is actually quite an important one. So inadequate problem solving and a tendency to engage in problem solving avoidance. So a tendency towards avoidance and not the skills to problem solve. So it becomes easier to feel overwhelmed in the context of whatever mix of stressors and feel that there's no way out but to potentially end life. And often it's this is why Dr. Amen and others have said it's suicide is unfortunately a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? Because most things do pass. Most situations do pass, right? If there's a tendency towards impulsivity or aggressive tendencies, at times this becomes a risk factor. If there's a history of physical, sexual abuse, or trauma, it increases risk. Chronic medical illness, especially of the brain or central nervous system, because then it makes it easier for the impulsivity, the inadequate problem solving, because the brain isn't working as well. So you can think of that in the context of like traumatic brain injuries or other infectious or inflammatory illnesses of the brain. If there's a family history of suicide. So there's already been a context for it. It can be an issue. Suicidal ideas, plans, or attempts, current or previous. And that's actually a big one. I've worked in ER settings, and that's one of the things we'll look at. If has there been a prior plan or attempt? And then obviously the lethality of the suicidal plans. That's one of the fortunately one of the predictors. So protective factors. So access to effective care, mental, physical, substance use care, restricted access to lethal means. That's why often, it's like, okay, have you removed the guns? Have you removed the knives? Have you removed the medicines? Have you removed any kind of toxicant, herbicides, whatever it could be, becomes an important piece in protecting someone who may be dealing with suicidal ideation. Strong connections to family and community support, emotionally supportive connections with medical and mental health providers, effective problem solving and conflict resolution skills. And then, some cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide can actually be protective and support self-preservation. Reality testing ability, and that's actually kind of important, just the ability to, which it overlaps with problem solving overall, but it also means, can I test my own thoughts? Can I also test my own perception of the situation? And, if someone isn't doing well cognitively or because of depression or because of some other illness or concern, especially that the brain, it can become difficult for them to see reality. So reality testing becomes important. Pregnancy, children in the home, a sense of family responsibility, and a positive self-concept. So you can imagine, these are things we want to be nurturing to provide that bulwark of protection, a hedge of protection for people who may be dealing with suicidal ideation or just even depression or anxiety. And then even for someone who hasn't, these are just important things because it helps us feel happier. So I mentioned that I would be providing a lot of actionable things beyond just a presentation today of, and some of these I will make available later and just to hand out. So one tool is, let's say you have a friend or a family member and you have some concerns and you try to decide, hey, should I reach out or call somebody? Most of the time, the answer should just be yes. You just call somebody if you have some true concern. Call their doctor, talk to another family member, talk to the pastoral staff, wherever it is. Just if you have the concern, just because it's not worth going, oh, I wish I talked to somebody. But here's a tool just to kind of get a sense of what to think about. You don't have to be their clinician, but at least it might be something that's helpful. So it's called Is Path Warm? Ideation. That's the I. So any thoughts of killing self or in recent days, so you can basically almost ask them these are prompts. Any substances, any change in alcohol or drug use, if you're seeing more substance use, purposelessness, do you feel you have a reason to be alive? Anxiety, agitation, feeling wound up, unable to settle. We'll also often sometimes see even insomnia. Trapped, does it feel like there's no way out? Hopeless and helpless on your worst day, did the future feel empty? Withdrawal, pulling away from people, activities you care about. Anger, more irritable, explosive than usual, reckless, risky, out of character behaviors, and then obviously the mood changes, big swings, flat. So is path warm? If you're seeing, it could be, any of them, but if you're seeing, a significant mix of these, then yes, I would want you to reach out for help, or at least reach out to a provider or encourage that person to pursue care. And this is at minimum, this is you can even call the new mental health related emergency number, which is 988. So just remember that also you can call 988 if you have some concern and are unsure. The other topic that usually comes up is intentional self-harm. What does that mean? So if there's been a major self-injury and does this mean that the person wants to kill themselves? It sometimes can be preemptive or prior to, almost like behaviors that mimic planning in some ways, but it's not always that too. So there are different things that can lead to this intentional self-harm. So they can be suicide attempts, and they can also be non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors. So they can be major self-injury in the sense, but these tend to be infrequent, usually associated with psychosis and intoxication. They can be stereotypic self-injury. This can be repetitive and reflects a biological drive of self-harm. This can be OCD based or um, other sort of compulsive related disorder based. And then they can be superficial to moderate self-injury. And this is actually the most common form and is used but people sometimes, this is where you hear about cutting. Um, and it's often not purely in suicidal desire, but is done to relieve tension, release anger, regain some kind of sense of control, escape from misery, or even pull them out of depersonalization. They've been depersonalizing or derealized the whole time and need something to ground them again. And it's a maladaptive coping strategy. We do not want them to do that, but it's not always directly uh, associated in with immediate risk of suicide if this is occurring. Nevertheless, they still need to pursue care. So there are pathways to safety and hope, and which is what we're getting into now. The one in science we already talked about is path warm. The basic things of just remove means. So knives, guns, any access to substances that could be toxicants, anything that medications, excess access to medications, avoiding those things becomes important. Obviously, monitoring is needed, and then call in a crisis line like 988 as needed. For my professionals in that are observing this, there are tools that are readily and freely available to help rate and rank risk. Our goals are to strengthen the brain with a mix of skills, which we'll get into, and then help ourselves, our clients, our families, our friends learn to shape their thoughts and actions by improving the flexibility of their thinking, starting small and building from there, connecting with others, and something I'll spend some time on at the end called the 4 Cs. It's actually quite key to all of this. So we'll get to the 4 Cs towards the end. So the path to hope, how do we get there? And this is a path that we should all walk, actually. This is a path that's wellness for all of us. And in many ways, I could just do a talk and just call it the path to hope and not even do the first part of this talk. But I wanted you all to know why we are doing this and what the importance of it. So, all right, the brain can change. That's the beauty of it. Everybody talks about neuroplasticity. And this is the mechanism in many ways of how the brain changes over time. So the brain can reshape itself with experience at every age. It's new learning. The formula for that is we have to be alert, we have to be focused, we have to repeat it, and then we got to rest because that's when we consolidate that learning and then do it again and follow that cycle. Okay. Practice can be adaptive or maladaptive, and this is a big one. Our routine stereo wiring. So this maladaptive element is big because I will often mention to clients sometimes that your brain gets good at doing whatever it's doing, especially if it's doing it in repetition. So you can be doing, you can get better at being anxious if you're not careful, right? So you can get better at being rigid. And the goal here is to improve your overall flexibility and improve your ability to challenge your thoughts and be more light and resilient. So again, neuroplasticity, just to give a little bit of sense, I mean, people hear the word all the time. So what does that mean? It means that you can maybe make new cells, you can make new connections. This is new synapses. You can strengthen the connection. That's a big one. And then you can weaken the connection. Sometimes weakening the connection becomes important, right? If you've already had a bad habit, you have an addiction, you have something that isn't beneficial for you, the goal is to not only is to do those less, so you weaken them, and then do the things you need to do more by strengthening them. So for instance, if you're someone who ruminates negative, meaning that you're focusing on your negative, the failings of the day, every time you do it, every time you go with it, you unintentionally strengthen that pathway. When your therapist says, "Hey, we're going to start doing," you're going to start doing a practice where you pause that rumination and focus in on gratitude and a gratitude practice. Initially, it's not going to feel very easy to do, and it's not even going to feel rewarding to do initially because it would be on a weakened pathway. But as you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, you get better. So when you do that gratitude practice every night, when you do that affirmation every day in the morning, you start to strengthen the particular pathway there. Over time, if you no longer, or at least significantly less, trigger that negative cycling repetitive pathway, you eventually start the process of weakening those other older pathways. Unfortunately, it takes time, right? So, but that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. At the same time, if you continue to go back and even defend that I'm being practical, I'm being realistic, we get into it and focus in on the negative, and ruminate. We aren't able to weaken that pathway, and we actually do the opposite. We can continue to strengthen it. So neuroplasticity can take place when changes occur, changes we want. There's a mix of things that occur actually in the brain to allow for this, but it can result from everything. It can result from traumatic events, stress events, social interaction, the good stuff, meditation, the good emotions, learning, paying attention, diet, exercise, new experiences. I often like new experiences as a great one. I've noticed that even in my children that if I take them traveling, I always feel like they have a leap in growth and thought, especially after a trip. Charlie, do we have some questions?
Yeah, we do, Dr. Emina. First, we have a question from Russell. It says, is this information in your book? I work with Lighthouse on my AACC coaching and want to have more faith-based coaching for those in church.
Yes, a lot of this is in the book. As I mentioned, I will also be providing just a brief handout, and then maybe we can find a way to send that out later. But yes, a lot of this information is in the book.
We have a second question. I have lived through the area of copycat suicide in young people. Now it seems that the school shooters are suicidal plus homicidal. Is this a new trend or something different?
It's so that's actually a really good question as to what someone who chooses to harm themselves versus someone who chooses to harm others in the context of harming themselves. There's a difference in how their brain works in some ways, and there's a tendency to that it's not just as they're definitely not the same type of person. They may be wanting to die, but some want to die in a way that unfortunately has been fed by whatever set of algorithms they got pulled into. So that's in itself its own longer discussion, and maybe at some point we need to do that talk. But there definitely is a different psychological patterns for those people who eventually choose to harm somebody else in this context. They too can be very depressed. They too can have some other mix of things going on, and I guarantee they often have. And Dr. Amen has actually talked about this and imaged on this. They often have damaged and brains also in some way, whether it's from inflammation or toxicity or and such, and then maybe further damage by again going down these pathways of these algorithms that feed them the same type of things and eventually get them to a point where that they think that's the answer. So
those are the only two questions thus far.
All right. Thank you all. So neuroplasticity in action. This is actually a nice little exercise. I'll give the instructions for this, and But I want you guys to just think of it as like there are ways to get your brain to be better at doing things. It takes time and it takes some practice. So for instance, this is a nice little exercise. I think I'd mentioned earlier that um, being alert is a part of getting your brain to learn something new. Being focused, right? Repeating it and resting are extremely important points of learning something new. So this is kind of an exercise here. I want to keep everybody awake too, and it also shows you that there are tools out there for almost teaching yourself to activate and get into things. So for instance, we'll just do this a quick version of it, but the first step is to get alert. So what that means is you find some sort of sensory cue. It can be something you're looking at. So we're actually going to do this as an exercise. I want you to find a spot. It can be on the screen. It can be off the screen. You're going to look at that particular spot. Okay. And I'm going to count, I'll probably say about 10 seconds or so. You're going to look at that spot for about 10 seconds. And you're going to notice something unique about it. Okay, so you pick that small spot, you're gonna notice something, one detail, its edges, its brightness, its color, whatever it is, and then I'll be quiet for like 1 or 2 seconds. Okay. Now, as at the same time as you're doing that, I want you to think of an action tomorrow. Okay, something that you wanted to do. It could be something like, hey, I needed to drink more water, so I'm gonna fill that water bottle. I'm gonna put my shoes out that I want to take that walk. So I'm gonna put that shoe out that I want to take that walk. I gotta text that friend that I know I needed to text that friend, but I haven't texted that friend. So there's an action you wanted to do. So you're gonna be looking at this spot and then you're gonna think of this action. Okay. And then want you to visualize yourself actually doing this action at the same time. Okay, so you're visualizing yourself doing this particular action. Whether it's texting that friend that you know you needed to reach out to and say what's up to, or say hello to. You've been thinking of them, but you get so busy. And you're gonna think of the time, I might do it later in the afternoon, and this is what I'm gonna do tomorrow. Okay. Then after we're done with that, you're gonna just for about 10 seconds, you're gonna close your eyes. You're gonna close it or lower your gaze. Try not to overthink in that moment. Just let your mind relax, and then you're gonna do a little slow inhale. So inhale through your nose, out your mouth, and let your shoulders kind of relax. Okay. After you've done that, I want you to say to yourself, good job. You could say good job, you could say good rep. Just good job. You're gonna do this again. Okay. All right. So what did we just do? All right. You can create these little micro moments of attention. These micro moments of attention then give you alertness can then feed into when I want to create a plan of action. So I force my brain to be alert. I force my brain and there's a visual reason for that, by the way. Just the fact that when you try to look at something fairly close up, notice the detail of it, you're forcing alertness, you're forcing attention and focus in that point. And then we're hacking that network in some ways to now do this next step of I have this task, I see myself completing the task, and I now am anticipating reward with doing the task by saying good job. It seems small, but what it then starts to do is it creates an anticipation of a completed task in brain. And then it creates a pathway potentially because you've already recognized that, hey, I could do this, right? Because you visualize it. Why did we close your eyes after? Because those little moments of micro rest become important. That actually allows your brain to consolidate that information, that learning signal, right? There wasn't other loudness around it. There wasn't other signal around it at the same time that you were trying to think of, oh, I need to get this task done. So I'm going to want you guys obviously to practice it when I'm not speaking to you, right? But it's almost a little mini brain hack. And we use tools like this. I mean, if you think about like if any of you have heard of EMDR and such, there are ways to tap into how our neurophysiology works to get us to act and activate ourselves. And I want to emphasize that sleep portion of it or that micro rest portion of it. Because often what we do is we do not do this. We're active all day. Our brains are going, 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 going. And then when we say we're resting, what do? We turn on the TV, we get on our phones, we start scrolling. We're not giving our brain an opportunity to learn something or to consolidate that learning. And we do that all the way till we sleep, and then maybe we don't get enough sleep, and then we get to a point then where we maybe are saying, "Oh, my memory's not as good, or I'm not as focused." Unfortunately, we're not giving our brain an opportunity to be as focused as we otherwise could be. So I know some questions are coming up, so I'll ask Charlie in a moment when he gets back for any questions there. But uh, think of this as our brains are flexible, and you are able to do strategies to improve your focus and task completion. So Charlie, I think there was a question.
Yeah, there were two questions. One from Katie from New Zealand. Is there any pattern of spec for people who have attempted suicide having an overactive anterior cingulate gyrus? Curious about the flexibility part that is mentioned.
Excellent. You're almost reading ahead. Okay, yes, we are going to specifically discuss the different parts of the brain and how they can contribute to it. It ends up not being just one part of the brain. The beauty of our brains is that we have multiple systems that attempt to generally compensate for each other. But usually when someone gets to a place where they would want to harm themselves, it's because multiple systems failed. So it's usually not just purely about the cingulate, but it can be a mix of the cingulate and other parts of the brain too.
Thank you. Melissa from Canada, also by way of Southern California. She's up there for a little bit. She'll be back. After my brain injury, I've experienced a lot of OCD habits, and particularly the looping thoughts. Any strategies for interrupting them so I don't create more neural pathways?
Oh, perfect. Actually, I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that brain injury, but that again fits in with one of the examples I'm going to have in a few minutes. So I'm glad you're on. Okay, so
They're getting you
this will
queued
work
up.
well.
They're getting
Yeah,
you queued
you
up.
guys are getting me queued up. Okay, it's like I'm getting the anticipation going. So all right, I'll move quickly into that. So what shapes brain function? There's biology. Okay. And even though we just say it as biologists, so this is such a deep layer because the brain is so complex, the networking effect of the brain is so complex. Genetics does impact it. And so the genetics you inherited, the epigenetics of how your parents' experiences, your experiences, what genes that turns on and off. If you've had a head injury, as that example, it can change how the brain fires and how it works and how you control and regulate different pathways in the brain. Infectious, inflammatory conditions, toxins, hormones, nutrition, all these things can impact biology. Our psychological state, so how we think of ourselves, our personality, our internal narrative, which we'll talk about, the environment, how supported we feel or not, or even just the toxic component of our culture at this point, our beliefs, our meaning, our spiritual self, and why are we here piece becomes important, right? Because that changes how we deal with stressors, right? If we see a purpose. So brain systems and how they shape us. So this is actually and this is just a simplification because the studies are actually pretty cool on this as far as like the different parts of the brain and what they do and the network effect. So we'll spend some time talking about the frontal cortex, which is we always think of as the CEO, right? So of us, the most advanced part takes the longest to develop. Forethought, planning, organizing, attention itself, um, telling you to stop if you need to, right? So if your frontal lobes isn't working as well because of injury, because of head injury, it then changes how well you can regulate these other deeper structures, these limbic structures here. So that becomes one of the mechanisms for why someone may struggle with looping. Actually, it sometimes changes how we would normally treat OCD. If I know that someone's frontal lobe is decreasing activity, it might not just be as simple as calming the brain as we may choose to at times. It sometimes may include increasing activity in the frontal lobes to improve the down regulation of other parts of the brain. So Next one, the anterior cingulate, the basal ganglia, the insula. I'm putting these together, but these help with problem solving, recognizing patterns. So there's if it's working well, it can be helpful. It can be helpful for flexibility and shifting thought and solving and understanding things and seeing patterns. And we'll talk about what happens when it's not working as well. The basal ganglia and insula, it's for motivation, there's reward, but there's also anxiety. But anxiety can be a useful tool because it helps protect you. It can be part of preemptively planning. So planning for the storm, as I say. And then the thalamus, so that deep limbic system, setting that emotional tone, the bonding, the connections, and eventually even impacting our meaning also. The temporal lobe and the amygdala, where there's language function, memory function, and then threat detection. And so we'll talk about those. And at each of these spots, you can have a change that can make it more likely that someone would be more likely to have suicidal ideation. So for many of you, if you're already aware of the AIM clinics, you know we do SPECT scans, single photon emission computed tomography scans. These look at blood flow in the brain. So really what we're measuring is blood flow patterns, and these blood flow patterns help us look at activity in the brain. So we're using blood flow to measure activity. From measuring activity, we can have a sense of what a healthy brain is versus an unhealthy brain. And because we've done this so long, we have a good sense of what healthy is versus what unhealthy is. Okay? And that can help us figure out particular patterns also. Right. So on the left here, these are 4 different views of the surface of the cortex. There's a top-down view here, a right-sided view here, a left-sided view. Underneath view, this is healthy because it's relatively smooth and even. And then this deeper scan is a limbic or emotional brain. Okay. I'll give some examples today. So just we won't go in such in depth that you're going to understand everything perfectly with scans. If you already have a scan, maybe you will know a lot of this already. But so I'm trying to balance the two of going not too in depth, but just in depth enough. So this is a deeper scan. This is a limbic brain here. We're going to be picking up activity in the emotional brain. The colors do matter here. Blue is lower activity, red is medium activity, and then white is high activity on this one. So white, high activity in the cerebellum is normal on this scan here. And then on the surface, the colors don't matter as much. We just want it smooth and even for good activity everywhere. Okay. So frontal cortex, what does it do? Focus, attention, planning, impulse control, judgment, empathy. You learn from your mistakes, forethought. This is an unhealthy one, right? You're seeing decreased activity in your frontal lobes here. At minimum, this is person's going to be more likely to be a little bit more impulsive, may struggle with attention. This is the person that will have ADHD, potentially diagnosed with ADHD. They'll be looking for strategies to boost their dopamine. They're probably potentially more at risk for some addictive behaviors that push dopamine, so they can get stuck on that screen a little too long. They may chase a little bit of sugar. They may look for things that maybe riskier behaviors overall. Again, it doesn't have to always be a bad thing for certain people, because people have learned these can be my creatives, my out of the box thinkers, my explorers. They challenge themselves a bit more. So having decreased frontal lobe activity doesn't always have to be a curse, but it can be challenging, and it can make it harder to do certain things, especially maybe they have the excitement and interest to go start the business, but then to run the business becomes a little bit harder. That's where the good COO becomes important in that context. So why would someone have decreased activity here? This can be genetic. This can be because of head injuries. It can be a mix of reasons, and this becomes almost another one of the risk factors. You would say, if someone was to have suicidal ideation, could they be more impulsive? So if this person was already depressed and had a mix of other risk factors we already talked about, and then they also used alcohol on that particular day, and they had access to a weapon or something, then it becomes easier for them to make an impulsive decision to harm themselves. Right. So their pre-existing state plus the perfect storm of other variables, then can make it easier for an individual with significant decreases to then harm themselves. So just to be clear, it doesn't mean that the person who has it automatically is going to have suicidal thoughts. It's all the other variables has to happen, right? Whatever issue is happening in their personal life, their personal situation, if they tend to not want to problem solve, if they've been abusing a substance, if they're also dealing with some kind of illness, and they also have access, right? So what helps the frontal cortex? This is not going to be an exhaustive list, okay? This is just to kind of give you some sense. There's more in the book and all the books that Dr. Emina has written. He's amazing at this, of course. And then obviously there's some in the book here too on the suicide solution too. But so frontal cortex, what helps? Just go on a walk. Go on a little walk, move, do some push-ups. It wakes the brain up. Sleep regularity is important here. This is why, when they start sleeping at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., even if they wake up at noon or wake up at 1, and well, it's like they got the same amount of sleep, right? It's not the same. It's not the same for the brain. It does impact the efficiency of the brain overall. Protein at meals, very important for as protein breaks down amino acids. The amino acids you then use to manufacture dopamine and norepinephrine, which then help wake up that frontal lobe. But keep in mind you do need cofactors like magnesium, zinc, iron, your vitamin D. The other things are needed there, but just for simplicity, protein. Sugar drops that frontal lobe like it almost like it's alcohol, so you have to be careful. So decrease sugar. I'll come back to the scale. They're team pieces, right? Coaching, CBT, things like neurofeedback. Yes, medication, supplements can do it. Things like tyrosine, ginkgo, they are phosphatidylserine. They're a mix of supplements that can help wake up that frontal lobe. And transcranial magnetic stimulation can be another tool. And then skills. You can build skills over time, right? So we talked about the importance of physical activity up here. Just you could go on a walk already. But the importance of skills, noticing, naming, and choosing the next right action. I think on the handout I'll do a little bit of descriptor on this one, but it really is just a skill, noticing, hey, I'm having in my body, I feel that my jaw is tightening, I'm getting tense, I'm triggered. What story am I telling myself here? They don't respect me. Naming whatever is the emotion, the need, the distortion. I'm hangry, I'm hurt. I need respect, I need clarity. Wait, am I mind reading right now? Did they really tell me that? So being able to name it out. And then choosing, okay, what's the next thing I could do in this? It's not next thing for 10, a year from now. It's next thing I can do in the next 2 minutes. What's a good thing I could do in this next 2 minutes? Do I take a walk? Do I ask a clarifying question? Do I reach out to someone who's a support? Do I just pause? Do I not just immediately respond to the text? Do I just draft but don't send? Sometimes having these appropriate skills gives your frontal lobe time to kick in. All right, next one, cingulate and basal ganglia. All right, so if you notice here, I want you to notice that there's much more red and white in here, right? Earlier I mentioned red and white in the back is fine, but to get all this extra activity here, that means this brain is going to be much more active. This one actually is running pretty much a diamond pattern at this point. The cingulat's very busy. The basal ganglia is very busy. You get some insula activity. This brain is lit up. And what does the cingulate do? The cingulate, I also tell people, can make you money if you learn to control it. It can pay your bills. The cingulate's job is to error detect, find problems, find patterns, predict them, fix things. It can be amazing, as long as you know how to turn it off. If you struggle with turning it off, then it can create issues in the sense that you're always looking for problems. It's hard to turn it off. You're thinking about problems that are in the past, problems in the future, problems that are someone else's problem. And then the downstream effect is that if your brain is focusing on the negative or the problems, and you're feeling disempowered for whatever reason, because it's in the past and the future, then it's going to rev up the rest of the brain too. You're going to generate emotions from it. So we have to be careful how we manage our cingulate. This combination, especially with the basal ganglia and insula, sets the anxiety and can set motivation. So why would our brain want anxiety? Because anxiety actually keeps us safe. It helps you prep for the job interview. It helps you get out of the water if the waves are starting to get too big. It helps you go inside of the storms it looks like a storm's coming. It's important for us. It's problematic when the anxiety starts to limit you from doing life, though, when it shrinks your world. Right? So it can be beneficial. Too little anxiety actually is problematic. Too much obviously can be problematic. And then some of the states we think about: over focus, getting stuck, versus underactive, low drive. And not to confuse anybody, but this is the beauty of how the brain works, is that since it's a network effect, if your cingulate is very busy, but your frontal lobes up here are working great, like these, you might be able to regulate your cingulate pretty well. You can keep it in check. But if let's say you had a head injury and your frontal lobes are down in activity, then your down regulation capability of your cingulate won't be the same. The cingulate will now loop more because your frontal lobes are less able to regulate that activity. So when it comes to treatment, it's not only things that you would do to calm the cingulate, it would be things to raise my frontal lobe so that I can calm the cingulate down there too. All right. So this is a nuance that comes in with treatment, right? So, all right, cingulate plus basal and ganglia and the insula, what help? So 4 to 6 belly breaths, right? You're ruminating, you gotta stop that thought stream there, right? So again, I'll say take a walk, go for a run. My high cingulate clients usually like to go on runs, go on swims, something that's rhythmic, kind of gets the mind to quiet down a bit. But doing that 4 to 6 belly breaths, in your nose, out your mouth, belly goes out, not your chest. So I'm taking a deep breath and your chest is going up. No, it's different, almost different nervous systems. If you're taking that big chest breath, it's the sympathetic nervous system. If you're taking that belly breath, it's the parasympathetic. And if you remember, parasympathetic is the one that says rest and digest. So you're pressing a button in your brain, basically, while you do that belly breath that says relax. In your nose, out your mouth, relax. Brief cardio burst. So do about 4 sets of that. Brief cardio burst. Do something with your hands. Get your hands busy. Crochet, do something. Paint, draw. This part of your brain likes routines, predictability, complex carbs. Okay. It likes sugar too, but if you use sugar here, you'll get a rebound effect. So in the movies, when the person is sad and they're crying and they're eating the ice cream or something, yeah, to cool it down at the moment, but you get a rebound effect. All right, so we have to be mindful there. Skills, options help the most here. If you're interacting with a friend or family member that you can definitely tell their cingulate is on because they're very rigid. Provide options. It's options. Questions and options. Gentle prompting in that way, not telling only. CBT, DBT, biofeedback, again, therapy, and then come up with options with a clinician.
We do have another question, Daniel, that's
Yes.
coming. It says, to what extent, and then in parentheses, percentage, your best guess, does a focused forward plan make a difference in the individual's life? In other words, many people have no plan. When someone can find their plan, are they also able to find their purpose?
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like some of you guys must be reading my slide somewhere or something, but we're actually going to get into that. It's actually a big component of living a life more abundant, you kind of have to have some direction that you're going in. And then there's this element of excited expectation of what you may discover on that path. But yes, a more forward focused plan becomes important in moving us forward and creating that level of hope.
The same person just wrote, therefore, suicide of no use at all.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because if you know where you're going or where you could go, where you potentially could go,
Mhm.
then you recognize that this too shall pass.
We
Right.
have another question from Ray up in Seattle, Washington, and asked the question, what's your take when someone has low prefrontal cortex and low temporal lobe blood flow B12? Tyrosine, Sami, and Ginkgo feel like I just drank 5 cups of coffee and make me highly irritable and unable to shift gears out of it. I take them individually, never together. I really want to take these because they were recommended by an MD, but I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah, that's the beauty and the art of this. There's so many layers to that. There can be gut related issues that make someone more sensitive to a mix of supplements. And then especially with low temporal lobe, you always have to say, have I stabilized temporal lobes first? That's actually one of the things we there's a sequence of things that we go through in our mind when we're working with a client. It's like, depending on what we're seeing temporal lobes wise, I need to know that I've already worked on stabilizing that. So have we, especially if we're working naturally, are we using GABA? Are we using L-theanine? Are we using lithium orotate? Have we gone through a process of titrating up there on that dosage before then bringing in a tyrosine or so L-tyrosine or anything else that could be stimulating for that frontal lobe? If we haven't done an adequate job stabilizing the temporal lobe, then it does become more likely that they would struggle with tolerance. It's not for everybody, but some people can struggle with tolerance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it for right now.
All right. Deep limbic, what it does, so that's the one right here in the middle, sets out emotional tone, integrates sensory input, the sleep, appetite, libido, bonding, empathy. Very important part of the brain here. The connection piece is important here. High activity here, you need connection, you need community. The more we've pulled back from good quality connections and relationships, the more likely to be depressed. This part of the brain will bias to as negative at times too. Again, it's a part of the whole threat detection element of things and improved situation element. But if you focus on the negative and feel disempowered and are alone, very hard on the brain. Can feed low motivation and inconsistent productivity. All right. So what helps here? Connect. Text someone something uplifting. Text someone that uplifts you, uplift somebody else. Move. A lot of things for the brain is move. That's usually the answer. Move in some ways. Move or volunteer. Move, volunteer, do both. You can do a lot of things for your brain. Movement with music, gratitude journaling, consistent sleep windows. Sleep again is another foundational pillar. Attention training to positives. Okay, so this is another therapy piece, but this is another discipline in the sense of, hey, I'm going to be using that neuroplasticity thing to get my brain to be better at being positive. Reconnect to values and meaning. Again, what that potentially volunteer types of therapy, connections or relationships. Even if you've said, hey, people have hurt me, and I'd never want to minimize that, but your brain still your brain still needs connection, some level of safe connection. And it's like, okay, where do I start? Do I start with friends? Do I start with if that's too much? Okay, I'll start with the pets. Start with pets, and then try to find people who are like me, who I can connect with. This is a big one. I mean, I'm using a pretty unhealthy scan here just to show this, but temporal lobe and amygdala. So if your temporal lobe is injured, it's tough, right? Because it can impact how well you regulate a lot of areas here. It can impact memory, language, music, rhythm, social, facial cues, spiritual experience. It can also impact how you regulate your hippocampus. So that'll be memory again. And your amygdala. And remember, the amygdala's job is to threat detect. if so, another threat detection element. You see how many areas of our brain kind of are about keeping you alive in general, right? So when the brain, if someone says I need to end my life, you can now see that it's multiple systems that would have to break down for you someone to get to that point, right? Because multiple parts of your brain are saying, don't let me be eaten, basically. So the temporal lobe, the amygdala is looking for larger threats. We don't have lions running around as much. Again, depending on where you're calling us from in the world, you might have some things that can eat, so you have to be careful of them. But in general, it becomes other things we identify as threats. It could be our boss, it could be a parent, it could be a friend, or ex or something. We can see them as threat. Um, if we are unable to control it, this can lead to dissociative symptoms, irritability, aggression, lability, panic, deja vu symptom. Someone who just misreads situations. And you're seeing way more issues or problems are like, well, you said it like this. And you're like, wait, I didn't, that's not what I was that can happen more in that context because the brain will misread maybe something as a verbal cue and then maybe also misperceive and see more threat in particular situations, right? And
We
then
do.
the challenge then becomes the person may want to see it as fact, even though maybe they need to reality test it.
Speaking of
Sorry,
eat,
Charlie.
we just had one question from Laura saying, is high limbic usually associated with increased or decreased appetite?
So it's interesting. It can go either way because there's something about how we all soothe ourselves. We can soothe differently. So I'll give an example. Like high cingulate sometimes can go with like um, increase like carb craving, and the person may want to eat a bunch more to like calm that cingulate. But at the same time, it can lead to such level of rigidity that it can also go at times with restrictive eating patterns too. So you can kind of go either way with some of them. Sometimes it's excess, or sometimes it's low. The other caveats that we'll look at there is like, okay, if that's up in deep limbic, what's going on with the thalamus? So I'd look at the thalamus and see some other things because that can also dictate which direction they go. All right. All right. So temporal lobe and amygdala, what helps? Music. Music with a lot of things is huge. Anger management and strategies. Sleep again. Blood sugar management is huge here because that will really irritate that amygdala. Taking even some of those stimulating supplements or a stimulant without stabilizing the amygdala first, you'll get more irritability. Okay, so that's it. That's that important piece to note. And then connecting with an ally, feeling like you're not alone becomes important here. Also, at some point, choosing to reality test. I didn't put it in here, but you have to go, hey, am I seeing the situation right? I know that sometimes when I get in these situations, I tend to get focusing on the negative. Am I seeing it right? Um, I will go past the case vignette today. I want to really focus in on skills. Okay, so that you have something to look on yourself and something to support others with. So let's say I went through. Well, let me see if I can go back here. I went through this quickly, but this was a vignette about like a male maybe who's having some problems and having some symptoms. So I'm giving the short, I'll give you kind of what you do here. Um, the 60-second family support script in some ways. So someone says something and you're concerned. Um, you got to connect first because this is a question that always comes. It's like, what do I say if this person says something? Well, I'm with you. Thank you for telling me. Validate. This sounds heavy and exhausting. Ask 0 to 10, how intense is it right now? Versus going, don't think that, oh, it's not that bad. It's not, you shouldn't feel that way. Unfortunately, that sounds invalidating for people, right? So being very careful to validate first and hear them and listen. Hey, you want to just breathe with me for a few seconds, right? I know this has helped me in the past. I think you told me help you last time when we did that breathing thing together for a slow breath. So maybe let's go on a little walk. And then what's 1 2 minute action you can do now? Well, which another way of saying that it's like, how can I help? Do you have an idea of something you'd want to do? Do you want me to help you come up with some ideas of something we could do? Do you want me to help you find someone that can help us? Right. But it really always starts with connect and validate. It becomes much easier for them to hear anything down here if you've already connected and validated. And then I took it even a little further. So if someone's in this zone of mental anguish, I'm a burden, nothing will ever change, I don't matter, I can't handle this. This is hard to know what to say. If it's, you, that person who's dealing with it, then I need you to have words to say to those. I'm loved, I'm learning. Just one small step tonight. My presence has weight. Versus, hey, you're a family member and I don't know what to say in that situation. Well, you do matter. I'm glad you told me. Let's pick one tiny thing together that we can do. You're important to me. Stay with me. I'm here one step at a time. Right. So a mix of just direct feedback of things you can say in those moments. I think I see another hands, another question.
Yeah, we have two more. One from Russell, who's asking, how much in all of what we're talking about does social media and cell phone addiction fit into this, and what part of the brain does it affect too?
Yeah, it's interesting here, the social media piece. The social media, unfortunately, is able to tie to hijack our brain runs. Social media, in particular, the way it's set up, because think about how most social media is set up now, right? It's this scrolling nature, and there's short form, there's very quick access to dopamine. And it's teaching our brain to want dopamine in that particular way. The reality is that we never in the history of time were able to context switch that quickly. Like literally you would have to and I'm saying context is like what's immediately around you. In the history of time, you'd be in this one context. And for me to switch this context, I would have to like get out and stand up and walk somewhere else. Now you could just be all in on a screen, one context, swipe another context, swipe another context. It's changing how our brains use dopamine, and it's changing how we motivate ourselves and stimulate ourselves and such. And then obviously because of what we're looking at, there are messages from that speak to us too. So if we have a belief system, the ads will feed that belief system, and the ads usually feed the algorithm will feed that belief system and feed us more things that match that belief system, and it leads us to a place where we actually get worse at challenging our own belief system, which then creates more inflexibility, and inflexibility can set you up for illness. Just the same way as like if your leg was tight and or your back was tight, you try to pick something up, you're more likely to hurt your back. But cognitive inflexibility can set you up to hurt yourself. All right, because if something happens, a trigger, a trauma, or something occurs, you're less flexible to seeing it in different ways and managing it. All right. I'll answer another question in a second, but I want to finish this one real quick.
Actually,
so the story,
it wasn't a question, it's a comment back to you.
okay.
Another moment for us to say, Karen said, what absolutely lovely comments to say to people in distress. Thank you.
You're welcome, and it's come up in conversations before of we just need something to say. What do we say? So it was like, well, just give you a list of things to say, because sometimes it is difficult, especially when we're scared too. You love the person, and you're scared too to hear that, and you just need some idea of what to do. All right, the story you tell yourself. This is big. So schemas are frameworks from experience that steer our expectation. This is like the software in us. This is so big because we get these schemas or this framework of seeing our reality from our upbringing. Okay. And they become, and here's some examples, like, some personal based ones. I look a particular way. I have a particular personality. In social settings, this is what I do. In event, so and they could be positive. It's not like they're all negative or something. Like you could have a self schema. I had a self schema that, well, actually, I did have a self schema. I wanted to be a doctor. So, like as a kid, I had a version of this. It's just a funny self schema here because I actually liked broccoli, and that was the only vegetable I could eat or liked as a kid. I got better and I can eat more now. I actually did want to be a doctor, and I thought of myself as smart. But that schema was beneficial. So when if I dealt with a bully, if I dealt with a teacher that wasn't as nice, or I had some kind of negative encounter, my self schema can help go, well, okay, whatever, I'm gonna be fine, right? Versus if I had a weakened self schema, it could negatively impact how I perceive the situation. So we all have our schemas. It's our framework for seeing our reality. Distortions, predictions, these predictable thinking traps that confirm schemas. So this is a tough one, and I'll give you an example of that in a second. The combination, if unchecked, can amplify hopelessness and reduce help seeking. All right, so let me just set the frame here. I've been telling you about the brain all this time, and I'm saying that sometimes if the brain is injured, it impacts your ability to regulate yourself, your emotions, and maybe that leads to more suicidal ideation. But your brain runs software, okay? And the software is the next piece of it that creates the vulnerability. If you have a stressor occur and you have a schema that is I am defective, I'm a burden, my pain will never end, life is a burden, then, and your brain is not running as well at the time, then it becomes harder to solve the situation. Distortions that come up, there are a mix of distortions that tend to come up. These are, again, these are almost thought-based disorders in a way. It's like it's all or nothing thinking, mind reading. They should just know what I'm thinking. It's like, no, they shouldn't. This doesn't happen. Maybe you can sometimes get it, but they have their own thought process too. Catastrophizing. It happened bad once, it's always going to be bad. Emotional reasoning, labeling, discounting oh, this is a tough one. I see this so much in my clients. If they don't do as well on something, they hyper focus on that. When they do well on the thing, it wasn't that big a deal. So the brain gets no dopamine for doing the thing, and then their brain is less motivated to do the thing the next time. Right? Over personalizing things, should statements become really, really, unfortunately, can then feed into the I am defective schema, right? So there's mental filtering, there's black and white thinking, labeling, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing. It happened this one time, so it's always going to happen like that. Everyone is just going to hurt you, right? And this actually becomes an important piece too of this, right? At some point, we have to challenge our distortions. We don't need to defend them, because what ends up happening is that sometimes people defend it. Someone says, hey, maybe we could look at it differently. They're like, no, don't tell me how I should look at it. You don't understand. I'm like, oh, yes. So obviously in that setting, we should have made sure we connected first and validated first, right? Instead of going directly to, no, you're looking at it wrong, because then they're not going to be in a position to listen to us or hear it. But if you are that person that sometimes may have a distortion, you need to challenge it at some point, right? Because it's only going to create pain in you. And it's not something to defend and feel and overly own. Because if you own the distortion, then you own all the negatives and feelings and emotions that come after it. And that's not fair to you. So how do we start working on these things? So catch, check, choose. So catch, write the recurring thought precisely. Okay. Check, check with others, name the distortion, list two alternative explanations. And this one is big because you sometimes have to go ask other people and say, well, how should I be thinking about this? You might have to look it up a little bit and think about it, and then list two alternative explanations. If your brain is more rigid in its thinking, it might be difficult at times to look at those alternative explanations. And then eventually we want to get to the place where we want to choose that balanced statement aligned with our values. You're going to do catch, check, choose, and you're going to be like, okay, cure me of everything. No, you're going to have to keep doing it because of neuroplasticity, right? We said you have to be alert, you got to pay attention, you got to repeat it, and then you got to close your eyes and rest. And then go to sleep that night and get some good rest and eat some decent food and not scroll right after you did it and create too much noise for your brain to learn the signal. All right, here's the other one that I could probably just make a presentation of and just be done. It's the 4 C's of wellness. Probably gonna write a book one day and just call it the 4 C's or something. I think I'm actually gonna build an app one day. I'm serious. So that's just the 4 C's because this is its own thing. So these are I pretty much say if you just do this, you're probably gonna be fine in most situations. Um, and it's oversimplifying, but in some ways it can be. So you practice 4 repeatable domains, choose one tiny action today, choose at least one and build from there. So you connect. We're still, even if you're an introvert, even my introvert, I tend to be introvert, being a little bit of introvert, but even as an introvert, you still need to connect. There's still someone that needs to be part of your people that you need to connect with. So friends, family, faith community, your pet even. Text someone, call somebody, 10-minute walk with someone to say further. Connect. If you're parents, remember, connect before you correct, because they're not going to hear the correction if you haven't connected with them. Create. I think this is deep into the core of us. I do think, we couldn't have all belief systems, but I do think we were created. And if we're created, then there's something innate in us to want to create. And I think it's part of our purpose to be doing things that create in some ways. And when we don't create, we feel less than. We feel less than we are. So one of the big things I try to have people do when we come in, I'm like, what's your creative outlet? Because that becomes also part of your purpose. So write, draw, build, craft, sew, dance, make music, cook, whatever it is, make something small, even badly if needed. It doesn't have to be good. Don't put that extra pressure on yourself. My create is, I have a mix of create, but my create is even in the treatment plans that I work with clients. In some ways, seeing it as an art in some ways. So how can we continue to improve it always, right? That's part of my create, which then overlaps with my contribute, which is the next one. We need to feel needed. We want to feel wanted. We want to feel like we matter and we have value. And one of the easy ways to do that is support somebody else. If you're in the deepest depression, if you have any energy and can move at all, move your body and then go volunteer somewhere. And especially if you have no supplements, you got no medicine, you got nothing, okay, go move your body and go try to help somebody out with someone else. Help them move, do whatever you can. And I don't want to minimize anybody's pain or anybody's trauma, but it's sometimes you start at those levels and you build from there. Share a resource with somebody, hold a door, even just smile at somebody and hold the door a little bit decent. Last one is kind of a all-encompassing one in many ways. It's cultivating wellness. The choice to cultivate wellness in self also tells yourself that you're valued and you're important and you're loved. So cultivating that wellness in your routines, in your diet, in your movement, in your sleep, in the supplements, even listening to this, it's part of cultivating wellness. You're valued enough that you listen to this or read books and work on getting yourself healthier. Supporting that spiritual practice, working on that gratitude. I heard this once, I don't know who said it, but tenacious intention. So being intentional in life, just being tenacious about trying to be intentional as much as you can. And yeah, sometimes you gotta just let things happen. But it's good to just have an idea of like, hey, I want to work on this, I want to grow in this. There's something about reverence and or being in awe. So you see something beautiful and just like go to places where you go, wow, what? Where you feel small and it's just everything's beautiful. It's a different place in your brain when you're doing that. Right. And the last one, that excited expectations, probably one of my favorite ones because I think personally for myself, it was before I met my wife, I knew the season that I was going into. I was excited about it. I felt she was getting close in some ways. It was very maybe spiritual thing. And I had this excited expectation of what it was going to be. I didn't know what she was going to be. I just was like, well, let's see. And there's something about living life with excited expectation. Hey, Charlie, a question?
Yeah. Oh, and this has been an incredible session. I mean, first and foremost, thank you for taking this. Typically, our sessions go an hour, and you have now spent a whole hour and a half with us. So I can't thank you enough for what you've done and what you've shared. There's one person who just made a comment that I just need to share back with the group, and that's from Katie. She said, all of this makes so very much sense. I had a brain injury in 2021 where I lost my previous identity. So it was a
Hmm.
process of creating new schemas as to who I was to be afterwards. And
Hmm.
this has been incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, and I pray you've recovered well. So who asked the question? I pray you've recovered well. It's an interesting thing. Like when someone goes through any kind of trauma, it's like, do you have to reboot the system back to the way it was, or does it give you an opportunity to, all right, I need to figure something else now. I need to do something different. I can be different. I can be a new me in some ways, or me, but just with more intention.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's the and oh, here where it is, living intentionally. So this
Right.
again will be in that handout. I'll send it to Charlie. We'll figure out how to get it to people, but just
Right.
living intentionally. This is something I'm going to want you guys to do after this. Is like, what's my identity? What's my calling? Again, which goes with purpose. When challenged, I will what within my control this week. What are the things that are within my control that I feel good about, right? So I'm going to sleep better. I'm going to focus on eating more protein this today, tomorrow. Which lie did I used to tell myself, and how would I turn it to a truth, right? Nothing works out for me. No, no, no.
No,
I each thing I can make tiny steps that can eventually change my day or even change my life.
no.
And what's one big example, what action I could take in the next 24 hours. So um, I got some resources. We're pretty much done, but I appreciate all of you. And any
Um,
questions that you have, any more questions that are left over?
let's see. I don't see any here. Again, EOS is just saying thank you so much again for sharing this. This is incredible. And he's saying, would you please share the PowerPoint deck with us? That will be, this presentation is being recorded, folks. So this will be available to folks if they wish.
Yes, yes. And
So
then I'll Charlie, I'll send you
deck,
the presentation and the handout
awesome.
also. So okay.